And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Dr. Amit Goswami is a theoretical physicist, professor emeritus of the University of Oregon Institute for Theoretical Physics. His father was a Hindu guru in India, and his work, Dr. Goswami, brings knowledge of mystical traditions together with his love for scientific exploration. He is a pioneer of the new paradigm of science called Science Within Consciousness, as well as being a highly sought-after international teacher and speaker. Dr. Goswami is the author of 11 books, a number of papers translated into 9 languages. He's appeared in the very popular film, What the Bleep Do We Know?, and is the subject of a new documentary, The Quantum Activist. We've got a little clip of the trailer at coasttocoastam.com. Here's Dr. Amit Goswami on Coast to Coast. Hello, Doctor. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good to have you with the program. Fascinating subject. It's not every day that a physicist with your background also looks at many of the topics you've looked at in your life: evolution, God, existence, reality. How did you put the two together?
Well, it just happens, George. I don't have any rational explanation of how it came to me or whether I did it or not, but creativity is a very interesting phenomenon. Every human being is capable of it if we have the right curiosity and if we inquire about it with the right creative process. So I suppose I must have done some good in the sense that I engaged with the creative process, and that's what produced all this synthesis.
I was watching yesterday a documentary on the History Channel, fine cable network, just about things going on in the universe, how stars are being formed, just the magnificence of the universe, Doctor. And it just boggles my mind at how the universe has this order to it.
Absolutely. And especially when you put in the order that the living aspects of the universe bring about. I mean, the non-living is already so full of splendor, and the living and the potential of the living, it's not even fully realized. When you think of that, then you really get overwhelmed about the intelligence of the Creator.
Now, tell me a little bit about your background in physics, how you got into physics.
Well, I was a materialist in the usual paradigmatic ideas of physics, which is based on scientific materialism. Everything is made of matter. I graduated in theoretical nuclear physics, and for 10 years, that was my life. I used to calculate stuff, properties of nuclei, and used to speculate, give talks. But at one conference, I was invited, and I gave a talk. And I remember I thought I didn't do very well, and everyone else is doing better. And I felt so jealous that jealousy energy eventually just burned me out. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, I went outside. It was on Monterey Bay, and the ocean air hit my face, and the thought came from nowhere. And the thought was, why do I live this way? I obviously had a huge conflict within me building that my research life was very much separated from my regular other aspects of life. So I started integrating. That was the beginning of the new life in physics.
You've been credited for solving what is called quantum measurement paradox. Now, what is that? What does that mean?
Well, it means a very simple thing. Quantum physics says that objects are possibilities. Objects are waves of possibility, to be exact. And then when an observer looks, however, we find that nobody sees possibility. One sees actual events of experience. Objects are revealed as particles. So how does the wave become a particle? Just by observers looking. Because material interactions can produce only more possibilities. Material interactions cannot do anything but produce possibilities, bigger and bigger possibilities. So how does possibility become actuality? Just by simply the observer looking. So observer must have a non-material aspect. This is the paradox. How can the observer have a non-material aspect? If all we are is brain, that many neurophysiologists and scientists think of ourselves, then how can ever matter interacting with matter give us other than possibility, actual events of experience? this is just the beginning of the quantum measurement, and then there are many other paradoxes that come in also.
And somewhere you have to weave in consciousness into this whole equation, don't you?
Yes, and this is where it weaves in very naturally. So we say observer's consciousness must be non-material. That's the beginning of the whole paradigm shift. When we say that, people will immediately say, well, how does consciousness interact with matter? Because they are two different things. They could not interact without exchanging a signal. And if you exchange signals, that means you are exchanging energy. But the energy of the physical universe itself is always a constant. So how can energy be lost into the world of consciousness and vice versa? So these are very legitimate criticisms, but nobody was looking at consciousness in the right way. So what happened was that I had the idea came to me that if consciousness is the ground of being, consciousness is everything there is, consciousness is everything, and matter is possibility of consciousness itself, then consciousness can choose from these waves of possibility without having to interact, because it's choosing from its own possibility. There is no need for interaction, or there is no need for exchange of signal. And this signal-less communication has been discovered. So we already know that such interactions are possible. And that's the solution then of the measurement theory, that the observer's consciousness, through a signal-less communication, chooses, and that choice makes possibility into actual events of experience.
Doesn't that rattle the mindset of most scientists and physicists?
It does. It does.
No
end.
They're so practical, you know.
I know. And to think that matter, which is so solid and so rigid sometimes, and so concrete, and matter to be made of consciousness, something that is so nebulous and so vague and so woolly. And yeah, I can see the consternation of my materialist friends, and I'm very sympathetic to their difficulties and in grasping this. But if one grasps, here is the key. Materialist science, the way we do biology, chemistry, physics, psychology, medicine, all of these fields have developed so many paradoxes and so much of anomalous data. If you look at the totality, you'll be amazed that scientists are not concerned about it. In other words, the current paradigm is breaking down, except that we are so specialized, no specialist in his or her particular little narrow field does not notice the amount of anomalous data, the amount of paradoxes that have accumulated. Only a holist or a person of generalist interest, and I am one, I suppose, can see it, and then we get alarmed that there must be an answer. And when we find the answer in terms of a science within the primacy of consciousness, we discover to our delight that all the paradoxes can be solved, all the anomalous data can be explained. And so it's wonderful news, actually. Scientists have nothing to be worried about. The old science remains as valid as ever because the new science incorporates it. But the new science opens up a huge vista, a frontier that we now can investigate.
We do on Fridays what we call a mind consciousness blast to help people who are ill, Doctor. We have, we've got millions of listeners, and I ask them on Fridays, just when they have time, to concentrate on a list of people that are on a list, and they've got their afflictions. They could have, God forbid, cancer or just about anything, or maybe even they need a new job. So people concentrate on this, and it's very strange that there appears to be a lot of success with this. Someone who had a tumor, for example, is put on the list, and miraculously three weeks later, the tumor's gone. Doctors can't explain it. I'm not taking credit for it, but it's weird. These things happen.
Yeah.
How strong is consciousness?
Well, consciousness chooses from possibilities the actual event. So the trick then is that in what state of consciousness do we choose? It turns out that we choose in a non-local, non-ordinary, non-local state of consciousness. What does that mean? It means that in an interconnected consciousness. I spoke of this signal-less communication. in that state of consciousness, signal-less communication can happen. And this is why it is very potent in that non-local state, because it has the capacity of choosing from all possibility, all waves of possibility. And obviously, these possibilities must contain the healing possibility that you're talking about. So in that very non-local state of consciousness, we can choose the healing possibility, that particular facet of possibility that contains the healing of the person, of the diseased person. So it can be extremely potent. The whole point is that, of course, we are ordinarily, in our ordinary ego consciousness, we cannot access this non-local consciousness. If we can learn, if we can practice, with a lot of patience and a lot of creativity, if we can practice how to access this non-local consciousness, the source of this quantum choice from possibilities, then we could not only heal, we could solve economic dilemmas, we could find new meaning in our lives, we could discover love in relationships. The possibilities are unlimited.
You know, in the documentary, The Quantum Activist, you talk about people should re-examine their ideas, their notions of existence and reality. What do you mean by that? Re-examine their notions of existence?
Well, we have become materialists only in the last 50 years. Actually, before materialism became so strong, which happened in the 1950s with the discovery of molecular biology, because biologists thought that the secret of life is finally at hand with the structure of DNA uncovered. But this thinking that matter is everything and there is nothing but matter, this is very new thinking. Before that, what we had was a sort of a hodgepodge philosophy called dualism, where mind and matter were both regarded as potent. René Descartes, the famous philosopher, discovered it and or enunciated it, I should say. And this has been a part of Western philosophy ever since, until the 1950s, when this lost popularity because the materialists thought that matter can explain everything. In other words, mind can be explained by matter. So that's when we lost it. And because we lost it, we have to rediscover it now.
We'll be back with more, Doctor, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, do you know all about the iPhone app with StreamLink? If you don't, just go up to coasttocoastam.com and read all about it. As far as StreamLink's concerned, now you can get archives several years past. That's incredible, and you just accumulate them and podcast them, store them, do whatever you want with them, but you can go back several years now to get old shows on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory with our special guest tonight, Dr. Amit Goswami. Doctor, you wrote a book called God Is Not Dead. That's pretty dramatic for a physicist.
I hope so.
Well, I like your thinking because I agree with you. There's something out there. There's some kind of divine intelligence behind this incredible magnificence in the universe. Maybe other universes, and we'll get into that with you later on tonight as well. But when you say God is not dead, what do you mean?
Well, actually, the idea is absolutely wonderfully scientific and simple to verify. When we say God is not dead, of course, people get the idea that, well, religions, they are the ones who are supposed to know about God, and they fight with each other, so therefore there may not be any real definition that we can agree upon. This is not true. The first thing one notices is that all religions agree that God is a source of causation other than the material level of causation. Today we call the material level of causation upward causation, because in their picture, elementary particles are the final cause, eventual cause, and everything else is made up of elementary particles making atoms, molecules, neurons, brain, and so forth. And that's their picture. And these only material interactions, they build everything. But spiritual traditions, religious traditions say that no, on top of this, there is another source of causation, and that's the source they call God. So it's not that it's a woolly idea. It's really about, is there only material cause in the world, or is there any other cause? So what does this cause represent, or what does this cause, is there a signature of this cause? both of these things become clear in quantum physics, because in quantum physics we need a source for choosing, because quantum physics says every object is possibility. So there has to be a non-material entity that chooses the actual event from the facets of these possibilities. So we need a causation, a source of causation, and this is how this source of causation works, by choosing from the possibilities that is offered to it by material interactions. So we have a clear idea of how this causation works. And the next question is there a signature of the causation? And we find, to absolute surprise, that there are absolutely wonderful and unquestionable signature which can never be simulated by material interactions. One of these signatures I was talking about earlier, called non-locality, signal-less communication. All material interactions must occur via signals. Signals must carry material interactions. Otherwise,
and these signals are everywhere, aren't they?
Signals are everywhere. So if you look at space-time universe, there is no way that one can communicate without any signals. But it just so happens that in quantum physics, there is this non-locality, there is signal-less communication. We have discovered it experimentally in 1982, and since then, many other experiments, including human subjects, have shown the ability of signal-less communication without exchanging signals. So how is it taking place? The idea is that consciousness is mediating this kind of interactions, and through downward causation. This new source of causation, which we call downward causation, to contrast it with upward causation. This causation not only exists, it has a definite theory, namely it is the quantum choice, and it has definite verification by virtue of its unique signature. One of these signatures is non-locality, signal-less communication.
Are you a believer in the Big Bang Theory? And if you are, what the heck is it?
Good way of putting it. Well, Big Bang Theory is something that one can believe in because it is also based on a good theory, and it is also based on good data. We have data which suggests, namely cosmic microwave radiation background that pervades the whole universe. This background radiation comes to us from all directions. And that could happen only if, and it's cooled off just the right amount since the universe exploded in a Big Bang. So all these things agree with the basic theory. And Einstein's theory predicts that there should be such a singular event. So all these things are the good news. The bad news is, from a quantum point of view, of course, the universe must be a possibility until consciousness looks at it. So this question is very interesting, and to make a long story short, there is now a principle called the anthropic principle, which is again based on some very absolutely amazing coincidences. So what transpires then is that the universe is built in such a way to make such a sentient observer possible, and when the sentience comes about, then only the whole universe going backward in time becomes manifest. Now you said that what the heck the Big Bang is doing, and now imagine that the Big Bang is not even there in a chronological sense that we are used to think. Big Bang is there, but only when a conscious observer looks at the possibilities, collapses the possibilities into actual events, and then going backward in time, all this stuff, the solar system, galaxies, supernovae, Big Bang, all that happens, but only going backward in time from the event of that first observation.
Do we as non-physicists make a mistake when we think about reality in a physical sense? In most cases, we think about physical things.
Yes, unfortunately we do. We become used to thinking of the physical things as outside world being there permanently. We don't think that they exist in possibility. This is the common mistake we make, because the physical is external to us. And it seems that nothing we do affects the physical. Because of that, we think that the physical is there permanently without our having to look at it. But quantum physics is saying that in truth, it cannot be that way, because the mathematics of quantum physics, and there is no need to doubt them, because they are verified to such absolute order of accuracy that nobody doubts the veracity of quantum mathematics. So this mathematical theory is telling us in no uncertain terms that the world must be possibility until consciousness looks at it. So this is a camouflage, that the world appears so permanent, appears so solid, appears so independent of our looking. But the truth is that it comes moment to moment into appearance, into manifestation, only when we look.
Is it safe to assume that the rules of physics and the rules of the universe are the same all over the place?
Yes. It is safe to assume, because we look at the universe backward in time. We look at past events. When we are looking at another galaxy, we are looking at distant times. And it seems that the properties of these galaxies or these very distant stars we can understand using the same laws of physics and the same parameters that are involved with the laws. So our belief is that we have verified that the physical laws are not dependent on space and time. They remain the same over time, and they are the same across space.
When we think of a divine creator, we think that all of this had a beginning from nothing, which is also very difficult to understand because I can't comprehend what nothing is. But when we think about this, that a divine creator or something jump-started everything that we believe in, whether it's just this universe or the multiverses, then the question has always come, what started the divine creator? How did that
Who created the creator, right?
Yeah, who created the creator? It's like the chicken and the egg, right?
Yes, sort of. But quantum physics has a very beautiful answer to that. See, this is where consciousness is the ground of being, and consciousness and its possibilities being the basis of everything helps us to understand, helps us to solve this complete riddle that, what is before anything that you can think of before the Big Bang or before the Creator, as you're putting it very beautifully. But in quantum physics, consciousness and its possibilities is the eternal beginning. It's the beginning forever, because if you include all possibilities in consciousness, think about it, past, present, future, every possibility is already included. Therefore, that's a timeless reality. Reality that contains all possibilities that ever was or ever will be. That's a timeless reality. So in that reality, nothing can ever happen. And the reality as we see it, as we experience it, is manifesting from that reality moment to moment in stages where there is some forgetfulness, there is some limitations that is imposed on this everything goes consciousness. Only with those limitations, eventually a manifestation becomes possible. And then universe truly can begin. Because whatever has some beginning will have to have an end. So the idea is that reality, ultimate reality, is timeless. It has no beginning and no end.
I assume because, your father was a Hindu guru, that you were raised a Hindu, which means you have got to have a profound belief in life after death. Is that a pretty good assumption on my part?
Well, yes, partly. I mean, as a Hindu, I should have that assumption. But remember, I told you I was a materialist first.
Yes.
And so what happened was that my father's teachings, they were pretty compelling for a while, but I rebelled, probably because of overdose of this teaching, and became a materialist at the age of 14. And after that, I never believed in reincarnation until I discovered this new way of thinking about science and physics, quantum measurement theory and consciousness. And then after my book, The Self-Aware Universe, was published in 1993, in 1994, a strange thing happened. A gentleman, a theosophist, started coming to my office and preached to me about theosophy, which is based on this idea. One of the ideas of theosophy is reincarnation.
Yes.
And of course, how does a physicist find an explanation of reincarnation? So my initial thought was that I can do this, but there is a series of coincidences ending up in a dream. One morning, I should say, I was dreaming. I was just hearing a voice, and the voice became clearer and clearer. And when I woke up, I heard the clear admonition. And the admonition was, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is correct. It's your job to prove it. Now, Tibetan Book of the Dead is about this, what happens after we die. It's about the journey of the soul through bardos, openings, until it's reincarnated. So after that dream, I realized that, no, I have to take this very seriously. And I did. And as a result, much insights followed. And I have a theory of reincarnation, which I published in a book called Physics of the Soul.
Tell me about that. That's fascinating.
Well, it is. It is. The thing that we often don't understand or don't even think about is that, we think that everything that happens in our life, everything that we learn, all of that is stored in our brain. But when we posit that mind, the meaning giver of our life, that's what mind is. Thoughts have a component that matter can never process. Matter can only represent it. So does the brain make the memory of everything that happens in our mind? It turns out that it does. For the content of what happens in our lives, for example, you were born in so-and-so place, you were born in with so-and-so parents, those are contents. So those contents are all in our brain. Those are recorded in our brain. We all remember my father's name was this. That's history. But there is another aspect of our life that is never recorded in the brain. That aspect is what we learn, the propensities, the characters, the habit patterns that we pick up in our life experiences. You have a particular way of thinking which enables you to be this great radio personality. That's you. I have a character which enables me to be a generalizer. That's me. Other people are mathematicians, musicians, architects. So all these people are born with a character of being the personality that he or she is. That specialty, that character, is something that is not recorded in the brain. So where is it recorded? It turns out when you do quantum physics properly, you find that it's recorded nowhere. It's recorded outside of space and time. In other words, that same word, non-locality. Yeah. It's recorded non-locally. It's non-local memory. It's memory that is outside of space and time and therefore remains there even when the physical body dies. That's the survival after death. So how about
it's like it's put on a chip and you can carry it any place you want.
Any place you want because it's traveling outside of space and time. Wonderful analogy. So in a future time, if somebody reaches out to that ship outside of space and time, then he or she is inheriting my character. And so isn't it fair to say that that's my reincarnation? So reincarnational memory is fundamentally this memory of this character, the pattern of habit. And it's so obvious because, if you look at any baby, I'm sure you have looked at quite a few, and you find them to be so intelligent. The materialist model is that the baby comes with an empty brain and everything the baby has to learn. I mean, the genes are something, of course, that is one theory, that genes give us everything. But that theory is so absurd. Genes alone, genes are just instructions to make proteins, not much more than that. So the other theory is that environment teaches them everything. But what if there is no environment at all to teach somebody about something that they end up to be very good at, like Ramanujan, an Indian mathematician. Mm-hmm. He had no mathematician in his family. And yet this fellow, when he was a teenager, he was solving mathematical problems that absolutely boggles the mind of even geniuses. So how did he pick up this ability of doing mathematics at an early age? Or how did Mozart write entire symphonies at the age of 6? These are mysteries that you cannot solve without invoking the reincarnational idea. So Mozart was born with the genius of the musician. That's what I'm trying to say. Why did he get it? He got it from non-local memory in a past life.
Absolutely, tapping into someone, something in a past life. You know, when you go to sleep, and assuming you don't wake up remembering your dream, you go from point A to point B, 6 or 8 hours of sleep, however long you did sleep, and you remember nothing. You know nothing, and I used to think, Doctor, is this what death is? You go to sleep and that's it? But I don't think that's the case anymore.
No.
I truly believe, if you believe in consciousness like you do and I do, there's more out there than what we think.
No question about it. More out there, and we can prove it, and the proof is already here. This is why I often say that scientific evidence for the existence of God is already here. So what are you doing about it? So we have to do something, because God must mean something to us. So what the spiritual traditions say, their idea is that since there is God, therefore be good, do good. So I think we should listen to that a little bit. We should practice, we should bring back these virtues in our life.
Sure.
We have become too much of a materialist today, and some of our problems, global warming, terrorism, economic meltdown, all of this in a bulk is due to the worldview. We are looking the world with wrong conceptual lens. This got to change.
At what age did you realize your father was correct?
That is a very good question. That story I told you about, that why do I live this way, that was at age 37. Then the next realization was that consciousness is the ground of being. Now, that happened at the age of 49. So
it took you 30, 40 years to realize
that. It took me
that.
a long time.
But
I am a very dense person in some ways. My beliefs become so strong in me, and then to overcome them, I have to work so hard. What can I say? There is.
I want to talk with you about the multiverses when we come back.
Sure.
Our very special guest tonight, Dr. Amit Goswami, his website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. There are two. One is, and I'm going to spell his name for you, AmitGoswami.org, and then quantumactivist.com. That's another website tied into the documentary that he's featured in. I'll be back in a moment with Dr. Amit Goswami on Coast to Coast AM. Here for a few weeks, then it's off to Chicago, emceeing the National Radio Hall of Fame, and then off to Albuquerque with an event at KKOB, our huge affiliate there in Albuquerque, New Mexico, of which you're invited if you're out in that area. We're going to have shows, live shows, by the way, in Chicago at WLS, and also originating from KKOB in Albuquerque. And then it's back to L.A. for a little bit, and then the holiday schedule all over the place. However, we will have, and I will be on the air for you on Thanksgiving night. We'll have a live program there. Christmas Eve, Christmas night, live programs as well. Program directors, make note of that. And then the following week after that, it's vacation time, and we'll have a full schedule for you there of people who will be hosting the show, including, I believe, Art Bell will be doing his predictions program. I'm pretty sure. I'll have more of that for you in about a month or so. Up next, Dr. Amit Goswami, as we continue talking about incredible things going on, not only in this universe, but maybe another universe on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory with Dr. Amit Goswami with us tonight on Coast to Coast. Doctor, the multiverse theory seems to be cropping up a lot these days. 20, 30 years ago, if physicists talked about other universes, they probably would have gotten chased off the stage, wouldn't they?
Well, it started with a theory of quantum physics itself called many worlds theory. That was the first parallel universe theory that came about, and that was in the 1950s. But still, before then, nobody would think about it because the idea is quite clear. No, because universe is unique. I mean, if there is a parallel universe, it doesn't make any sense because, by definition, we would not know about it. We would have nothing to do with it. It would be completely theoretical because we could never experimentally verify it. So it's pointless. But now the multiverse theories are coming about because, the materialists are positing it because, you see, I mentioned that anthropic principle earlier. Mm-hmm. That principle says that this universe have some uncanny characteristics that cannot be explained without this hypothesis that the universe is designed in a very fine-tuned condition so that life can originate in this universe. So these very special conditions, and scientists don't like fine-tuning because fine-tuning suggests a fine-tuner. Somebody designed the universe. And they don't like this design idea, as you know, intelligent design versus, theories of evolution. So that is the principal motivation. If we have multiple universes, then what happens is that there are so many universes, you can easily imagine that, okay, one of them may be fine-tuned just as an accident. Chance made it so fine-tuned. And we just happen to live in such a fine-tuned universe, but don't put any special meaning into it because, after all, there are so many universes that one of them can very easily be a little bit special looking. That's the idea. But again, the original criticism stands. Today we have these scientists constantly talk about pseudoscience when they criticize paranormal researchers or people having ideas like, is there extraterrestrial beings, and that they call them pseudoscientific ideas. But science, as Galileo defined it, and as I have pursued it, and many, many people, and most people, I must say, pursue it, science is a combination. It's a two-pronged way of verifying truth. It's a combination of theory and experimental data. If you posit a theory that can never be verified, we should not call it science. So this kind of idea, multiverse, although they are suggested seriously by serious scientists, but they are truly mind games because they are not science because you can never verify the idea. Without verification, every scientist should be take their ideas tongue-in-cheek. I mean, it's not really science, it's pseudoscience. But there are multiverses which we can verify. These multiverses are multiverses within consciousness. For example, we have the material universe, which we sense. We look at the material universe through our sensory organs. Then there is the mental universe, which we think. And then there is the vital energy universe, which we feel. And there is even the universe of archetypes, which we intuit. These are the real multiverses, and these are verifiable because I can verify that I have thought. I can directly experience it. We can compare experiences with each other. We can even study the characteristic of thought in the laboratory. So a lot can be done here experimentally. This is a real scientific idea of multiverse.
And these multiverses, if they exist in the form or fashion that some people are speculating, are they connected like bubbles would if you were blowing bubbles out of a little bubble machine?
No, see, they cannot connect because the connection would then couple the universes. So those material universes can never couple with each other because then they would be just considered one universe. They can interact.
Good point.
A universe, by definition, cannot interact with another universe.
What would then be between this is where my physical brain is again. What would be between the space between the two universes?
Well, there is no need for assuming that there is any space because the whole concept of space is space within a universe. It does not make any sense to think of space outside of a universe. You cannot even define really truthfully outside of a universe without a discontinuity. Something outside the universe can only be discontinuously outside. If it's continuously outside, then why not include it within the universe that we have? So you cannot really think of space connecting to universes.
I'm trying to imagine what multiverses would look like. Not connected. But and I just can't.
No, you can't. And this is why I call it pseudoscience, because you cannot not only think about it, you cannot devise any experiment to verify the existence of these multiverses. It's just a meaningless theory put together as a red herring so that we don't put much importance to this anthropic principle, which shows that there is a designer, because without a designer, how can we believe so much of fine-tuning coming about in our universe?
If you were teaching a physics class and you had two students sitting in there, and one said, Dr. Goswami, explain why things happen for me. I'm a positive person. I feel like I have a lot of energy. I meditate once in a while. I'm able to concentrate on things, and they happen. Whether it's a job or a relationship, these things seem to happen for me. And then the other person says, well, Dr. Goswami, explain to me why nothing happens for me. I'm negative. I'm down about everything. I don't accept things. I'm not a happy person. What would, in terms of physics, if this is physics, what would you tell these two?
You know, your question reminded me of a story that I read about Victor Hugo, the famous novelist who gave us Les Miserables, that famous story about the hunchback. So, the story goes, when Victor Hugo was a child, one day he and another child were sent out on a walk, and when they came back, the questioner asked, what did you see? To the other child. And this other child said, oh, nothing much, just as like any other teenager would probably say the same thing today. Their attention span is so small. But Victor, on the other hand, said, oh, so much I saw, I can't possibly think of describing it, but let me try. And he went on and on and on and on, describing all the various things, the splendor of wonder of nature that he saw. So, this is the thing. The optimist, the positive outlooker, is creative, always finding things to create, always have curiosity about the world. So what causes this and what causes that? And so always takes things in a positive way. So things happen because that's the way he's looking at the world. He's seeing meaning in the world where it is full of meaning. Negative person, on the other hand, is pessimistic, does not have any idea that there is any meaning. So always trying to find that lack of meaning, disengaged. And that disengagement means only one thing. Nothing will ever happen to this fellow because things happen, of course, but things pass him by. He's just an onlooker without any interest in anything that happens. And without that interest, we don't see meaning in the world. So, coming back to our main discussion, materialist versus consciousness fanciers, that is the fundamental difference. Materialists fundamentally are very pessimistic people. They refuse to see meaning in their life, refuse to see meaning in the world, refuse to see value in the world, and therefore they believe in a philosophy that takes away meaning and value from us. Whereas as optimists and idealist people, we believe in ideas, we believe that the world has plenty of meaning, and therefore things are constantly happening, and we are delighted explaining what is happening. This is the real fundamental difference, and it is a difference of outlook.
Does that also explain some people's ability to do healing? They are somehow tapping into something that is giving them this incredible ability to either touch people and heal them or to use energy to heal them. But it seems to be working for people.
Yeah, the point is that there is this vital energy world. And some people can tap into it because as you become a connoisseur of consciousness, you begin to see that we are more than just our material body. We have a vital body that we feel, and it is these vital energies that is coupling of this vital energy with the physical organs. That is what gives us vitality. When that vitality goes away, when the coupling is not so good, when we are not coupled with this vital energy so much, then is when we fall sick. So somebody who can give us an influx of vitality from his or her own access to this world, those are the healers. So we have hands-on healing, we have Reiki healing, we have healings by Qigong, that's a Chinese practice. Sometimes we use a little bit of matter. For example, in acupuncture, a little puncture is made in the skin with a sharp needle. So that's a little bit of interference. But of course, such a little bit, why such a little bit interference can do such a big bit of healing, that is the mystery. And that mystery is solved, again, by bringing in this concept of vital energy, vitality.
The Quantum Activists, your new documentary film. Let's talk a little bit about that. And it's based a lot on some of the things we've talked about. But tell me how you've structured it.
First of all, let me introduce my friends who did this movie, Reese Stewart and Renee Slade. two very talented people who just, they invited me to give a workshop at a small town in Oregon coast called Yachats. And they surprised me because this was being, they were taping it, they said. And there was no idea of making any movie at that time. But what happened was that the content must have just was flow from me. I, of course, enjoyed it enormously, but I never do these things in a prepared kind of way. It just happened. And they liked it, so they thought that they have the beginnings of making a documentary. But, of course, they immediately realized that the recording was not so good. And so they, in the subsequent 2 years, they recorded many more talks. They collected some 200 hours of
That's
tape.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it's really their creativity. They chose how the sequences would work. I gave a lot of talks at a lot of places around the university, in my office. In that conference, I gave a second conference a couple of years after the first one. And from all this, they, with their tremendous genius, collected the various pieces together and made it into a gestalt that shows what we are talking about so beautifully. I went to the opening of this movie. It was released last month, August 25th in Seattle. And I saw the movie for the first time. I saw a preliminary version 6 months or so ago, but that was very preliminary. I didn't see the finished version until that night on the opening night. And I was inspired. I mean, it seems funny to be inspired by your own image speaking of things on
It is. It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. But I must say I was inspired. I mean, they did a good job in presenting in this very world, with so many problems that we have, presenting the real idea of a world of consciousness in which all things are towards the good. It's evolving towards making a human society in which we will all live in tremendous harmony and peace and love, and how we can evolve towards that, First of all, we have to change the worldview. And second of all, we have to become creative. Third of all, we have to start loving each other and develop positive emotions instead of all this negativity that we are talking about. And it goes on and on. So these are real problems. But these two geniuses, they made the movie in such a way with such a collage of beautiful music and beautiful pictures that go with what is being said and make it into such a coherent collage of ideas that I think that's what inspires people who watch it.
I agree with that, too, and I think we need to take a first step to begin to change our direction this way. There is a factor out there, Doctor, I haven't been able to wrestle with yet on how we deal with it, and that's the greed factor of some of the elitists and the leaders in governments around this planet that take advantage of so many people. And to me, they are the stumbling block in getting things done.
There are some of the stumbling blocks, yes. But we have a recipe. We have a new economics that we are developing based on the primacy of consciousness. I call it spiritual economics. And I tell you this, that this current economics, which is not really Adam Smith's economics, this is very poorly publicized. I mean, I am amazed. Economics has so much deviated now from what Adam Smith discovered and what is called capitalism. We cannot call what is going on by the name of economics capitalism in the Adam Smith sense now. It has ideas which are completely materialist ideas. That has nothing, Adam Smith's time, we were not materialists, we were modernists. We valued both mind and matter. And it shows. Adam Smith would never allow greed in the equation for economics. Adam Smith would never allow speculation of money being the major part of what goes on as economic investment. Today the real economy, what Adam Smith thought of, this production consumption economy, that's a small part of the economy. The rest of it is just investment bankers play games with money like a casino. And that's what got us into this trouble of this toxic acids, and they're already thinking of putting out similar toxic acids, because the regulation is just not, I know the Obama government is trying, but I don't think they will succeed in making regulations. The lobbies are too strong, the Congress is too weak, and what have you.
Yep. You've hit it right on the head. You're absolutely right. It's also amazing that your field, physics, kind of intertwines throughout all of this, isn't it?
Yes, of course, because physics is, as you know, the basis of all things. And now consciousness plus physics, consciousness is the basis of all things, and then physics is the basic science of all things. So the two together, consciousness plus quantum, is giving us such a handle on how to think about reality that if we are able to make these changes in worldview, and I think that it's a must, because consciousness, all is evolution of consciousness. So eventually the movement of consciousness will remove this blemish called materialism, and we will get back to right track, and the right track will find solutions for these problems.
Do you wake up every day, Dr. Goswami, and say, I love what I do? I love this job. Yeah.
Is there any other way to live?
No.
Joseph Campbell had this beautiful phrase, follow your bliss. And I think you and I both are following our bliss.
Absolutely. You? Stay with us. We're going to come back in just a moment and talk about something we haven't talked about yet, and that's gravity, how that fits into the equation. And then we'll talk more about consciousness right here on Coast to Coast AM. Then later on, final hour with Dr. Goswami. We'll take your phone calls. I'm George Noory, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, we'll take your phone calls with Dr. Goswami. We'll be back in a moment. We'll talk with him about gravity on Coast to Coast AM. In the mix of things in the universe, Dr. Goswami, how important is gravity?
Holds it all together. So it is very important. Without gravity, the large-scale structure of the universe cannot be explained. So gravity is basic. At the same time, gravity plays a rather insignificant role in the way that our own physical body, living beings are made. So in that sense, gravity is important, of course. We have certain gravity effects on the way we live on Earth compared to, for example, if there was a weightless environment like in a spaceship. So it's not that gravity does not play any role whatsoever. But main role of physical bodies that we have is played by the electromagnetic forces rather than gravity.
And with gravity, of course, does that continue the rules of the universe?
Yes, the large-scale structure, all the laws of the large-scale structure of the universe, how the universe expands, how long the expansion will go on, all that is gravity, play of gravity. And maybe recently some physicists are making noises about some other universal repulsion, for example, playing a role also. But gravity is the acknowledged major role in that particular aspect of physics.
Dark matter.
Dark matter may be a concern, but it's borderline physics because again, the idea of dark matter is extremely difficult to verify. It's a speculation, and the experimental empirical data that people collect is also based on our models. So, it's very possible that in the future we'll have a better model, and then the notions of dark matter that we have today will have to be modified. So it's the models, the difficulty is that the models have many parameters. With that many parameters, there are so many ways of fitting the data. Let's face it. I mean, the data is just not numerous enough, and we have no control over the data. We cannot do these experiments in the laboratory. So it's very difficult to make scientific sense out of the vast, all the theories that are coming out in this respect. So I'm a little skeptical about all the different claims. I think partially it's just a maze of ideas that the materialists play with. And we should not take them too seriously. Principally because they're borderline pseudoscience, because experimental verification is impossible.
And talking about laboratory work, tell me the folks at CERN aren't going to create black holes and destroy us.
Well, that was a very, very speculative theory, which has absolutely not an iota of experimental verification behind it. It's just used to excite us. But there were some real good physics, too, that the CERN accelerator was built for. I'm not saying that all of the work that was planned with it is nonsense. Some of it made very much sense. There are some good ideas there, but black hole is not one of them. This black hole specs, this is an extremely speculative idea.
As they search for this God particle, two physicists.
That makes sense. That makes sense because there is this grand unification that people are positing. That is a very interesting idea, and only part of it can be verified. But this other part, this so-called Higgs bosons, they have not been found yet. And the whole theory depends on this Higgs boson in a major way. So if the Higgs bosons are not found, then this theory falls apart. But even this idea will never be verifiable enough for us to conclude that Higgs boson does not exist. People will always say, well, we have not dealt with high enough energy. And so how high an energy can you go? We are limited by the energies available for a machine on Earth, and we can only go so high in energy. That energy may not be enough to verify the existence of Higgs boson. So we are in physics, this high-energy physics, we are approaching very borderline scenario for a legitimate science. More and more it seems that ideas are given to us which are not really verifiable, like string theory is a good example of it, dark matter, another good example of it. These ideas cannot be verified in the laboratory. So on the whole, I think it is much better not to take these ideas very seriously, not to spend too much money on it. People can speculate all they wish. We have free speech, so I'm not saying that we should curb people's thinking, let them think any which way they like. But in the meantime, we have very important problems to solve: global warming, terrorism, economic meltdown, spiritual economics, healthcare. Consciousness physics has much to tell you about how to take care of healthcare, much better than the materialist medicine of allopathy. So these are the things that I would pay much more attention. Even a fraction of money that is spent today for making these high-energy accelerators, if that came to the research on the new science, I think would have major breakthrough. We could establish the existence of God beyond any reasonable doubt with just a 10-year program with a fraction of the money that was spent on the CERN accelerator.
That's a good point. And it seems like you're trying to use physics to solve many of the ills of this world, and I like that.
Thank you. I appreciate your saying that.
Are you getting support now from other physicists or other people in academia?
There are a lot of physicists who give support, and what is very interesting is that when physicists retire from their departments, then very often they start supporting these kind of ideas. But, while they're inside the university system, inside the academe, the ideas such as God still are complete pariah. Anybody who utters the G word becomes a pariah as a result. So it is very difficult somebody said, one journalist I think said several years ago that the G word, the concept of God, remained the last remaining obstacle for academia to handle. They just cannot handle it. They fall apart. If you, in the academia, you mention that you want to take this idea seriously, the God hypothesis, they just cannot handle it.
Getting back to CERN for a moment, a couple physicists working there said last week that they believe that God is going to interfere with its ability to succeed. I found that to be an incredible story.
That's very interesting. You have to look into it.
Yeah, I mean, they actually believe that something's happening with time travel, and they're coming back into time to screw up the machine so it won't find the God's part of it. Which brings up this question, Joe. Do you think in the future actual time travel will be possible? Our ability to go into the future or to go back into the past to see events?
Well, not any more than what we already do. I mean, these multiverses exist in the form of our mind and vital body and intuition and all that. And within those multiverses, we have already some time travel in the sense that we can recognize experiences from the future. We can sometimes people foresee some event that actually took place. For example, there is very good evidence that people recognize the death of Robert Kennedy. So this kind of phenomena already has some evidence in their favor. On the other hand, real-time travel violates completely the nature of time in several scores. First of all, Einstein's theory of relativity that has a kind of time travel, but it's a one-way time travel. You can travel to the future according to relativity, but you cannot travel to the past. And traveling to the past is impossible also because the nature of time has this one-way arrow built into it. Time flows from the past into the present to the future. Mm-hmm. It's not the other way around, because other way around would assume that all the universes lie there already somehow, and then we can jump from one universe to the other at a different time. But that picture is not the way the universe is in consciousness, because the universe is being created moment to moment from possibilities becoming actuality. It's not at all like universes can be there as a series of actual stations from which and to which we can travel.
If you were living, let's say, in the year 1600, would you have been able to envision what we're doing today in terms of science and technology? We've been to the moon. We send probes out of the solar system. During the 1600s, do you think
it would have been very, very tough. The reason is that in 1600s we were just getting into the basics of science, and we are struggling to come out of the grip of religion, Christianity at that time. And therefore, most scientists of that era were very careful to not to think that God is in the realm of science. I mean, they would not possibly think that God could be ever scientifically explained. They left God very separate. God and mind is the domain of religion, and science only deals with matter. That's the way that the Cartesian divide was made, and scientists pretty much went along with the divide until the idea came that matter can explain everything. That happened in the 1950s. But before that, people respected that Cartesian divide. So no scientist in 1600 would ever think that it's possible to think scientifically of God and verify the idea of God within science.
Okay, because I'm leading up to this, and that is, had you lived during the 1600s, what would you be able to see about 2000? What is out there in the year 2500? What do you think? 500 years from now.
We will be surprised, because our knowledge has, in the meantime, taken a quantum leap in the discovery of quantum physics. Because quantum physics is the final physics. It really seems that way, George. It's not somebody's imagination, because quantum physics is being verified with such uncanny accuracy that it is impossible to think that quantum physics will ever be replaced by another physics. And because we know the final physics that is with us, we know that these ideas we are proposing now, which we are verifying, like consciousness is the ground of being, there is downward causation, there is non-locality, there are similar ideas that verifies the idea of God and downward causation. Because we have good theory and good experiment, we can now predict a lot about how the universe will evolve, how we will evolve. Of course, the universe evolves very little in mere 500 years, so that's an irrelevant question. But how we evolve, that can be predicted. And my prediction, you want to hear my prediction?
Absolutely.
What happens in 500 years?
Yes.
I think within the next few centuries, the main thing that we will have is that our mind, the way our mind has been, stuck with rationality and disregarding emotions. So the first thing we will do is to integrate emotion and thinking. Have you been a fan of Star Trek?
I have been a fan of Star Trek. Bill Shatner comes on the program a lot, and Captain Kirk. I love Star Trek.
I was a Star Trek fan. And you remember this constant, incessant fight between Spock and McCoy about reason and emotion?
Exactly.
So that division has played long enough. We have divided like that since millennia. So now the time has come, finally, to end that feud and integrate them. And as we integrate them, we will be able to move beyond this pure rationality. That is, we dream of a pure rational world, but of course we can't because we have negative emotions and they're etched in our brain as brain circuits. We cannot rise above that. This dichotomic battle is being fought because we have ignored to develop positive emotional brain circuits. So once we are understanding this, and we now do, and we know that neurons are extremely plastic. So if we teach ourselves to have positive emotions, if we work these positive emotions out, what are they? It's the capacity to love, basically. Once we have that capacity, Teilhard de Chardin, a great Jesuit priest, said once that we have to learn, we will learn how to harness the energies of love. So that's basically my prediction, that we will learn how to harness the energies of love, we'll balance this negativity, we'll become overall positive, and then we'll jump from rationality to intuitive mind. Instead of reason-based mind, which is constantly difficulty in accepting emotion, also difficulty in accepting intuition, it is a world by itself. We'll give up that kind of mind and get into a more intuitive mind, which will value these archetypes like love, beauty, justice, truth, and goodness.
Will we get there because we have to, or because we evolve into it?
Well, both. We are evolving towards it, but we never evolve until we are hit with a 2x4. We are very stubborn sons of bitches.
Right across the forehead. Yeah.
And this is the way it is. I mean, how many people can be creative just by mere curiosity? If you say gently that, okay, go and investigate, that's not motivation enough. But if you send a disease, then we are interested in healing ourselves. So materialism has been sent to us as a disease, and now we have these problems, global warming, terrorism, economic meltdowns, and what have you. Now we are thinking, okay, we must have another science. Oh, God, give us another science. Otherwise, we just cannot take this ills from materialism anymore. So this is what is changing our worldview, and it will succeed. It will take probably decades and maybe even a century or two. So in 500 centuries, 5 centuries, where will we be? We'll be at a very good place. We'll be more loving, more truthful. We'll appreciate beauty much more. And we certainly do not have to watch this inane violence on TV every day. That I can promise you.
And, some people who practice exactly what you say right now and don't have to wait for 500 years, they will be way ahead of the curve.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Way ahead. You've got a passion for what you do. What drives you, Doctor? What pushes you?
Well, this passion is, I think it partly comes from my reincarnational inheritance. It's a passion to know. It's a curiosity that drives all good science. Partly, of course, I must also confess that partly it comes from some suffering as well. I have had difficulties in terms of discovering the nature of love. I have had a couple of marriages that broke down, and I did not know how to love a woman. For a long time, I have lived this way, and finally, I'm just very recently, I'm beginning to understand and appreciate the nature of love myself in a personal way.
Okay.
So some suffering, personal suffering has been helpful. But mainly, as far as the intellectual and objective stuff goes, a tremendous curiosity. Much of it has been driven by that. But again, the beginning was suffering. When I first started changing, come to the new physics, the main reason I told you that story, why do I live this way, full of negative emotions, jealousy, competitiveness? I just didn't want to do science that way. I love science, I always have, but I just didn't want to get into that base emotions in order to pursue what I wanted to pursue. I wanted to do happy physics. And with blessings of the divine, I have finally established a way of doing science, way of doing everything, in fact, in a very happy mood of mind. We can do it. We all can do it.
Instead of just the quantum activist, maybe we'll also call you then the happy physicist. What do you think?
Well, quantum activism is about happiness in life. If you become a quantum activist, your job is to transform yourself and the world in a happy frame of mind, to a negative to a positive frame of mind. That is the primary objective of quantum activism. So it summarizes it all. All I have to say, I'm a quantum activist. And immediately people will know that I pursue happiness, just as our founding fathers said. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's what we are doing. Our founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, in essence, knew about quantum physics. In essence. I mean, of course, they didn't know the formulas and equations, but they knew that pursuit of happiness will come to the recognition of something that we don't have yet. And they prepared us for an advancement in future centuries, and that is now upon us. And now, really, this is the American dream, I think.
Absolutely. Let's get that when we come back, and it'll be our final hour with you, Dr. Goswami. We'll take phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, this will be our final hour with Dr. Amit Goswami. We'll take your phone calls with him this hour right here on Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Goswami, if people want to see the documentary film, The Quantum Activist, how can they see it? Where do they go?
Well, they go to right now. It is opening at various places. For example, in L.A., a major market, it will open on the 11th of November. That's a big opening that is being planned, and there is openings in Phoenix, in Dallas-Fort Worth. In New York, it's opening in March, on March 21st, I think. So that's the first stage of how these movies are marketed, and when the public interest will build, then it will start being shown as a regular movie, hopefully sometime next year.
Super. And on the website, people can track, I would assume, where the different locations are.
Absolutely.
At quantumactivist.com. Great.
Yes.
Let's go to the calls. We'll pick it up by going to our wild card line. Scott, he happens to be driving from California to Vegas. Is this on business, Scott, or we're going to have a little fun in Vegas, or all work?
You know what? There's always room for fun. I'm going there on business, though, but my God, fun is just around every corner.
Well, put a number 8 in your wallet. They tell me it'll work.
Number 8 in my wallet physically?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I will physically put a number 8 in my wallet.
You got it. Go ahead, Scotty.
Put that down. 8 black, I believe that is. I'm not sure, but
yep.
Yes, Mr. Goswami. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were about the predominance of autism and how the increase in autism has seemed to exponentially expand here among children, and if you thought that was possibly something on an evolutionary scale, because you've mentioned that we need to be hit by a 2x4 to get us to move to the next evolutionary level, and I believe that. I'm a writer, and I'm working right now on a story that deals with autism, autistic kids, and it's my belief that it is more than just a disability. I think it's something that we haven't recognized yet as being a change, and the human race will eventually change and adapt, and this is the first part of that change, both physically and mentally. But you let me know what you think.
Of course, materialism has many effects. One of the effects is to bring technologies, and then because we don't have a healthy attitude towards these technologies, so we lose sight of the ill effects of the technology. Right now, the biggest problem is attention deficit in our young people. You all know that because you were in this business of radio, television. The wisdom is that they can't hold their attention more than a few seconds. So everything we have to teach, everything, the way we speak, everything has to be quick, because otherwise their attention will shift away. Does that bring in things like Nazism? Well, it can, because the thing is that you don't want to think. Anything that takes you a long time to think, kids try to avoid those things. And because of that, they are more susceptible to very authoritarian belief systems that make sense to them. And the other thing is, of course, is that they are now desensitized about violence. So violence is something they readily accept. In terms of the new science, this is because they want to feel embodied some of the time, because they are always in their head. So they feel very disembodied. So they bring themselves back to the body by watching violence, by watching sexuality and violence. So all these things influence the kids so much so that I think they may very well be susceptible to very authoritarian belief system. That did not surprise me. So you were right, however, that this is just a 2x4 with which you are being hit. As we are being hit, the worldview changes. As the worldview changes, we become responsible. As responsible people, we cannot possibly let our children become this way. We would limit the use of cell phones. We would limit the use of computer games. We'll limit the use of violence in TV. We'll limit the use of sexuality the way it is being used in entertainment. And in addition, we'll put positive things in schools, like we will allow meditation, we'll allow sitting down, we'll have more creativity in schools. Right now, it's very conditioned learning, very structured, authoritarian learning. Instead, we'll allow the kids to investigate, to be curious, investigate the nature of meaning. So I think that one thing will lead to the other. The first is, of course, a little catastrophic, a little chaotic, a little detrimental to our meaning processing. But eventually, when we go through this stage of suffering, I think the next stage is going to be quite brilliant, and we'll learn to utilize the energies of love.
Do you think there's a fear factor here also, Doctor? Let's say the swine flu, for example.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I mean, it's gone so bad. I mean, you are in the media yourself, but I heard recently a story. A huge accident took place in a bus, and there were school children in it, some 25 of them. And the reporters come, and the question they ask is that, is anybody dead? And the bus driver happily says that, no, nobody died. And the reporter went away. He's not interested. So, of course, these things are in a way that it has to change.
Sure
this cannot stand.
First-time caller, we have Lloyd in Tacoma, Washington. Lloyd, take it away.
Hi, George. So great to talk to you.
Thanks.
Doctor, it's an honor. I have a quantum mechanical question for you, or a question about the whole universe, I guess. I recently saw a video, and the folks on it claimed that the universe was bound more by electromagnetism than by gravity, and their theory tended to explain why the universe was not expanding at the rate expected by physicists, and it didn't require the use of strange theories like dark matter and such to explain a gap in how much matter the universe should contain based on its expansion rate. And I was wondering if you heard about this, and what was your take on it?
Well, I haven't heard about this particular one, but, this kind of theory that reminded me of the matter-antimatter kind of theories that were proposed before, and they don't usually work very well. They make some sense, and, of course, there are much unexplained data, and the theories of cosmology is really quite speculative, hard to make a science of it, because hard to find things that can be verified. That being the case, people will, of course, speculate. Dark matter is a huge speculation, so nobody can prevent people speculating that maybe electromagnetic forces are the more important item, not gravity. What goes against it is that the current theories based on gravity explains the phenomena at very deep levels, like, for example, the Big Bang or the galaxy formation or how stars evolve. Here, the existing theory works very well. And that has the idea of gravity playing a major role in them. So at large scale, very large scale, does that remain the case, or the situation changes drastically? It's very hard to rule out any theory at this stage of the game. But if I had to vote for it, I would vote for the gravity-oriented theories more than electromagnetism.
Okay, now we go to Seattle, Washington. Harry, it's your turn. Go ahead, Harry.
Thank you very much for taking my call, and I want to congratulate you, Doctor, for your fine work. Find more positive report on your presentation tonight than any I've heard for a long time.
Thank you.
I have been doing a lot of investigating on my own. I've been here over 70 years on this whole planet, and I see it falling apart very rapidly, unfortunately. I did find a website, burlingtonnews.net, where I learned a very lot. It was hard to pick up on, but I don't know. I'll try to get a hold of the people that operate that and see if they can't get it a little clearer to get into. But I find that there are many gods out there. They're not just one god, and they are on different planets in different universes. But there is one all over, above all of them, is Admiral Yahweh. And he is apparently pretty near ageless, and also we all reincarnate. Everything reincarnates, which the Bible doesn't tell you either. So with that information, I do want to thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you'll get a chance to go to that site and all the others, and maybe you can pick up on the things that we haven't learned here on Earth, because we are really reaching the end times. And thank you very much.
The end times. You think we're into the end times, Doctor?
Well, this is a little bit of a stretch, I'm afraid, but because thinking is more of a personalized God. The God that we are discovering in quantum physics is not a personality. But of course, that is a common way of thinking about God. We are ascribing some anthropomorphism, thinking of God in the way that human beings are. But actually, what is the most striking thing about the God that we are discovering is that it is quite objective. And this is good, because only an objective God, a non-human personalized God, can ever pass the muster of science. And science, otherwise, it would not be scientific. If God had personality, and personalized intelligence is doing all this, or a bunch of personalized intelligences are doing all this, then such a theory would not be a scientific theory.
Okay, next up we go to Independence, Missouri, east of the Rockies. Ryan, it's your turn. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yes, sir. First off, I'm big fans of both of yours. I'd like to say that I am a man that decides that he is of the thought that things had no beginning. Aside from that, I decide that there should be some kind of interpretation of the way that interpretation decides the way that etc. particles interpret the way that things exist. And I am wondering how perhaps that there is not a way that things began with spontaneous interpretation that allowed for existence altogether. And I'll finish. Thank you.
All right. Pretty intelligent audience here, Doctor, huh?
Yes. Yes, interpretations certainly, only those interpretations have to be trusted which are spontaneous. We call it creative moments. They're very spontaneous, instantaneous, coming into a picture, a new meaning, a new meaning of things that were very obscure before. And those are the interpretations that we trust. And you were completely right, very observant, that the present idea that I presented in this couple of hours, the idea of consciousness is the ground of all being, giving us a solution of quantum measurement paradox, is an interpretation which came in such a creative flash. So, these are called aha insights because it always comes with a surprise. A moment before, I did not know. I never would have thought that I would subscribe to an idea that now I totally believe in and find that experimental test exists for it. But before that moment of illumination, before that moment of aha insight, I just could never have guessed that this would be my next thought. So the spontaneous interpretations are the believable ones. You were right on, my friend.
I have described consciousness, Doctor, as being almost like a wireless internet where everything is connected.
Non-local internet. You got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go to Lakewood, Ohio. Mike, it's your turn with Dr. Goswami. Go ahead, Michael.
Good evening, George and Dr. Ahmed.
Hi.
Two really quick questions, and George, maybe you could ask him about crop formations. Dr. Ahmed, is human instinct an example of non-local memory? And what universe does the psyche occupy or occur in?
Well, the psyche, to take your second question first, the psyche occurs in a non-local way it is related to us. So consciousness connects the psyche, universe of the psyche, and psyche consists of three parts. One is a mental world, one is a vital world, and another is a supramental world of archetypes like love, beauty, justice, truth, goodness. Those are the archetypes. Those are the kinds of things that inhabitate that world. So the objects of these worlds we can connect to only through the intermediary of consciousness. So these are all four possible worlds within consciousness. Consciousness mediates their interaction. So when it is understood this way, then we realize that they are all non-locally connected without signals, connected with this interconnectedness. George was talking about this wireless internet. So imagine an wireless internet that pervades through all the four multiverse that we are really made of. And we have a body, personalized body, in each of these worlds, except the supramental. We haven't done that part yet. That is our future. But we have a personalized body in the physical. The mental and the vital body that we have are somewhat different in character. They are functional bodies of habit patterns rather than the physical structured body. Those are details. But this is the important thing, that it's a non-local connection.
You've followed, I'm sure, the crop formation, crop circles phenomenon, haven't you?
I have followed it, but here is something that I have not given much thought to it. Recently, it's funny that you asked that. This particular listener asked this question because I was asked it recently, and I had to say the same thing. That I haven't thought about it very much yet.
It is strange. Even if 99% are man-made, there's that 1% that we can't explain.
Yes, it is strange. It is very strange, and it is a regular phenomenon. So any phenomenon that is regular, that shows as a regular order of some kind, has to be taken somewhat seriously.
Absolutely. Now, what do you do next? Now that this documentary is out, it's starting to travel around the country. You're still writing more books?
Well, I am just finishing a book called The Quantum Activist because, our idea is to start a movement, quantum activism, where people will actively try to change the society. These ills that we have been talking about, global warming, terrorism, economic meltdown, democracy being in such a shameful situation. You are talking about in one of your ads, this divide, and you don't like it. I don't like it either. It's absolutely got to go. People should be able to have a decent, civilized discussion about things, and that is impossible today for public people. So politics got to be changed. The health care, of course, is a huge crisis, so that got to be fixed. So all of this requires enormous amount of work. And so what we are doing is creating a movement of people who will be dedicated toward their own transformation, and also at the same time will work towards transforming the world, transforming the social systems. In other words, they themselves will work to change democracy if they're in politics, if they'll work to change economy and businesses if they are business people. They will work to change education if that's where they work. And so people will pursue a meaningful life, bringing change to themselves and change to the world. You know, take our president seriously. Yes, we can, and yes, we can change that we can believe in. But that change, in my opinion, can only come if we change our worldview. It is a shame that people talk about change, but they never talk about what we really have to change first. We have to change the lens with which we look at the world, our worldview.
Absolutely. And we're going to come right back, Doctor, with final phone calls for you on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, final phone calls with Dr. Goswami right around the bend here. Next hour, Joshua P. Warren joins us for his paranormal moment, including a report on black magic. Hey, you know how I collect so many books. I mean, so many books from guests, and I like to give them out. And I'd like to give out 5 of them tonight if I can. 5 books, paranormal books, science books, you name it. Tommy will pick them and send them right out to you if you get this question right. I'm going to make this one easy for you, okay? Most of the time we do little movie lines and things like that. Go to nighthawkzone.com. That's one of the chat forums that listen and view and help Coast to Coast all the time. nighthawkzone.com. Click the Live Zone section once you get into it. You have to fast blast Tom, the first person with the correct answer, because there's a clock on Fast Blast, who knows who the avatar is for Bad Boy. He's the one who runs the Nighthawk Zone. So go to nighthawkzone.com, click Live Zone, look for Bad Boy's avatar, right? That little picture of what he's got tonight. And you have to identify that avatar and fast blast it to Tom, who's waiting now to get the answer. The first person will get 5 incredible books, compliments of Coast to Coast AM. And I'll announce at the top of the hour who wins the 5 books here. And we go back to Dr. Amit Goswami as well. When I get back to Los Angeles, we've got to get together. Do you travel out there very often?
Well, I'm going there on the 9th of November for that opening of the Los Angeles opening of the movie. So, yeah, that would be lovely.
How long will you be out there?
Just for those 3 days, 9th, 10th, and 11th of November.
You may miss me. I'm going to be in Albuquerque at our affiliate. Then I'm going to be right back.
I'm sure our paths will cross again, George.
They will pass in this life and the next.
Absolutely.
Let's go to West Jordan, Utah. Edwin, you're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi, Edwin.
Hi. Hey, Dr. Goswami, thank you for being on tonight and letting me ask you a couple questions.
Absolutely.
I very much agree with your statement about the positive emotions. It's like something that will eventually start closing the gap that has been a widening gap between human behavior and advanced technology and advanced civil behavior, civilization.
Yes.
One of the things that I've come across over the last several years, over the last decade or so, is that the concept of gravity being intrinsically linked with time itself and the obstruction of this omnidirectional neutral current flow that we call time results in gravity. And if that's true, then wouldn't it seem that being able to find some instrumentality that quickens time in a given space would be the opposite of gravity? For example, everything in the universe has its path accelerated toward or bent around a low time zone called a gravity well. It would make sense then to say that same thing in a different way, such that you could say everything in the universe has its path accelerated away from an area of space where time paces out more rapidly.
Well, these things are easy to speculate on, but it's impossible to experimentally test. So although it is true that gravity has effect on how fast or slow a time clock moves, but it is very difficult to find the intense gravity wells so that we can prove these things in an observational sense. And since science is based on both theory and experiment, my view on this is that we should keep away from these speculative, highly speculative theories that is now being produced by physicists because they ran out of useful theories. So now physics has become a plethora of very abstract, very impossible to verify pseudoscientific theories. This is very sad, and this is why graduate students no longer are running to physics for satisfying their curiosity. They would rather become businessmen and make money than worry about problems which are meaningless. Of course, I would like to invite everyone to problems of consciousness and primacy of consciousness science, but there is no money in it yet. So first of all, we have to convince the society, the government, to give us research grants to examine this field so that more quick changes can take place. More research money is needed drastically. So my urge to you is that don't waste your time on this sheer speculations of a dying materialist science. Turn to useful problems of ourselves, our consciousness, what we can do, how we can change. For example, how we can get ourselves out of these problems that we are repeating many times, economic meltdown, healthcare. These are the issues that we should invest intellectually.
Let's go to
gravity wells.
Glendale, California. Edward, you're up with us. Hi, Edward.
Hello, George. I just wanted to say every one of your guests is a true inspiration. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Welcome.
I have two questions, if that's okay. My first question is, how will you suggest to use quantum physics to solve world problems such as healthcare and terrorism? And my second question is, what stops the planet Earth from smashing into the sun just like an electron is kept from smashing into its nucleus?
Okay, the first one is interesting. So, and it's a big question. So let's see how we can solve the healthcare problem, and that will at least give you something. So here the answer is actually surprisingly amazing, because what this new science does, it legitimizes alternative medicine. These alternative medicine practices, acupuncture is a prime example, mind-body medicine is another one, Indian medicine of Ayurveda is still another one, homeopathy is another one. These alternative medicine practices, anybody who has ever undertaken them, and acupuncture probably is something that almost every American has had some experience with, are very effective, especially for chronic diseases. What quantum physics has done, it has allowed us to solve the fundamental objections that scientists always have raised against such alternative medicine theories. In other words, quantum physics allows us to develop a proper theory, proper verifiable theory of vital energy movements and mental meaning movements that these medicinal systems are based on. Therefore, with this knowledge, we really can, in a secure way, we can have an alternative to allopathy for those diseases for which allopathy does not have any answer, such as our chronic disease. So in this field of chronic disease, if we use the lead of quantum physics and bring this alternative medicine to bear, then our healthcare system would be solved simply because this alternative medicine is very cheap. The other thing that the new science does, quantum physics teaches solidly not only a sense of responsibility, but it also teaches us how to be creative. So therefore, people can take responsibility for their own healthcare, and people also if they get sick, they can learn to involve themselves into a creative process for quantum healing. Unexpected, we talked about it very briefly because George asked me about this program that he does with others where people get healed by others meditating on their healing. Similarly, a person can meditate on one's own healing and visualize healing possibilities. And in the process, creatively, what we call a quantum leap takes a discontinuous transition from disease to healing. This is available to every person if you or she would follow the step-by-step processes of creativity. Quantum healing and vital body healing, these new medicinal systems, taking responsibility for ourselves, preventive medicine, all of this becomes open in the new way of approaching health and healing through quantum physics and primacy of consciousness thinking. This is where the future of medicine is. And this would be fantastic because our costs would drastically go down.
And also he wants to know what keeps the Earth from flying into the sun.
That one is actually easy. It's unfortunate. It's one of the basic things that we think, but don't forget that the Earth is revolving around the sun. So the gravity is there, but because the Earth is also revolving around the sun, it falls a little bit. But because it's revolving, so it always falls a little bit. But because it's curving, it's always kept on curving. So we can put it this way, that the Earth is always falling a little bit towards the sun, but never enough, always just enough to keep in orbit, keep in the elliptical orbit that follows. In other words, if you neglect the movement in elliptical orbit, of course the Earth would fall into the sun. But because the Earth moves also around the sun, it avoids falling into the sun totally. It just falls always just a little bit to keep in the orbit. Okay?
Very, very good. Let's go now to Tony in New Orleans. Your turn, Tony. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I got a quick question about the time travel, talking about that the quantum physics, you can travel into the future but not into the past.
Sure.
So wouldn't that make, if you travel into the future, wouldn't that make that a one-way trip?
Yeah, it is a one-way trip. What happens is that you don't age, but if you did come back to Earth, then you would find that everybody else has aged enormously. So it is a one-way time travel in that sense that you travel to a future without aging because you jumped into a very fast-moving spaceship, if such spaceships could be built. But of course, this is where we really don't have any real physics because we know we cannot build spaceships of that kind. But it's a very popular idea with science fiction.
Do you believe in the grandfather paradox, that if you go back in the time, kill off your grandfather?
It's a very popular theme of science fiction. I have such great science fiction novels to recommend to you if you like this grandfather effect. No, it's impossible to actually enact it because we cannot build such very fast-moving spaceships. Only if a spaceship could be built which moves with the speed of near the speed of light, then only we age so little that we can come and meet our grandfather, and all these questions would come about causality. How could I be produced if my grandfather wasn't there, and stuff like that.
I would be remiss, Doctor, if I didn't ask you if you believed in extraterrestrial life, much like our intelligence here.
Well, George, I actually had a tongue-in-cheek chapter in one of my books. I mentioned Physics of the Soul before. In that book, I actually have a chapter on UFOs, and I, in part of my mind, I never investigated it thoroughly enough to say things without feeling that I'm speaking tongue-in-cheek. But if you have that caveat in mind, then I can say this, that some of the data that, there are two kinds of UFO data. One is these bad guys that are coming after us. They really want to kill us off and occupy Earth, so to speak. Those those theories are not very attractive. But there is also these UFO sightings where people meet very benevolent, very wonderfully developed, very spiritual people coming from outer space. That makes some sense because, that is our future.
Yep.
And when we become very spiritual, when we become very adept to the subtleties of consciousness, then a day might come when physical laws can be violated in a local way, not in a big way. Because if we try to do it big way, then the universe cannot exist. But if we do it in a local way, there is really no harm done. So in other words, these people may have the capacity of disappearing and reappearing. In other words, materialization in some very future sense that we cannot even fathom. I mean, I cannot imagine the science of this. This is where tongue-in-cheek comes in. But suppose these people do it as a violation, clean violation of a physical law, just a local violation, and then these UFOs start making sense. And these people really, there is some indication that they are such loving people that maybe they have understood the laws of physics so thoroughly. They have purified themselves in consciousness so thoroughly that they are beyond the laws of physics themselves. So it's not completely, I cannot completely rule it out, let me put it that way. If you have read the Course in Miracles, there is a reference in Course in Miracles about science of eternity. We deal with science of space-time. It's a space-time bound science. But couldn't there be a science also when we have the capacity of taking ourselves in that transcendent domain where where downward causation comes from? If we are capacitated to have our being so much in tune with downward causation, with God, so to speak, then we may be able to perform local miracles, and then it would make complete sense to have visitations by this UFO and these kind of people because they are not bound by the restrictions of space travel as we are.
Great. By the way, Doctor, I want to thank you before we take one or two more calls for your insight, your passion, and your positive energy. It's very refreshing.
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. It's a pleasure.
Anytime. And you're on 528 radio stations right now. It's pretty big, huh?
Yes.
Let's go to Mount Shasta, California. Lauren, you're on Coast to Coast. Hi, Lauren. Go ahead.
Hi. Good evening. Doctor, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions that might sort of merge your background, your childhood, with what your profession. Have you studied physics as it applies to truth realization or self-realization for individual human beings? Do you have any theories on how people perceive or could perceive non-duality?
Actually, this science that we have built, read my book, God is Not Dead.
Okay.
It's explained in that book. These states of self-realization, they really are achievable. One has to follow creative process. And if we follow that, anyone has the potential to see for himself or herself these states of consciousness that traditions call superconscious. Our ordinary ego consciousness is a separate consciousness. But in this superconscious states, we become one with the universe. Read the book. It will all become very clear.
What do you think of Stephen Hawking and some of his views?
Oh, certainly he's a great mathematician. There's no question about it. So the question can be asked is how great a physicist he is, because nothing he has ever speculated has been verified. So as a physicist, I don't know. I'll keep an open mind. But as a mathematician, he's absolutely one of the greatest mathematicians that ever lived.
Are we generating more and more young people with the kinds of minds that we need for the future to carry us through? Physicists, mathematicians, people like that? Or is that slipping worldwide?
I think we are generating them because the curious ones, remember, we have people reincarnating all the time. So there would always be that genius bunch. My worry is not about them. They will always be there. My worry is about the run-of-the-mill kid who is not being properly chaperoned into these new technologies by their parents or by their teachers, and therefore getting into attention deficit disorder and stuff like that, or having definitely small problems with attention span and therefore problems with learning. So I'm more concerned about the average situation. The geniuses will always be there, and the talents will always be there. There is no question that there are as many kids with curiosity today or more with curiosity today than ever was.
Well, thank you so much. Our special guest tonight has been Dr. Amit Goswami. His website's linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Invite you all just to track his new documentary film, The Quantum Activist. I'm George Noory. Back in a moment with our paranormal moment and Joshua P. Warren. Well, Joe Cannon from Charlotte, North Carolina gets our 5 books by going to the nighthawkzone.com. He looked for the avatar of Bad Boy, and it is Patrick McGoohan, the late actor, and starred in The Prisoner and a number of other TV and films. That's who the avatar is. And you, Joe Cannon, will get the 5 free books. We'll get them out to you as soon as you send back that special email to Tom. Okay? Very good. Up next, Joshua P. Warren. What is black magic with his paranormal moment? Joshua P. Warren with us, founder, president of the Paranormal Investigations Group in Asheville, North Carolina, as you would call the LEMUR group. Joshua, I just might have you sing that old black magic tonight. How are you?
That would be fitting tonight, because if things get any weirder this month, I believe the old Ghostbusters vortex is going to crack open above my house, and phantoms are going to be flying from wall to wall. And, in fact, right now, I actually have to be concerned about being protested at an investigation. Can you believe that?
What do you mean? What's happening?
Well, there is a very haunted house here in the South. I won't say where. It's a private residence. And it's so haunted that the woman who lives there, she's desperate to have me come and try to help her figure out how to deal with this. And she has warned me that there is a church nearby of very conservative people, and their official stance is that, Harry Potter is evil, and that ghost hunting is associated with black magic and necromancy, and we have to be extremely secretive. I have to sort of put on a disguise and slip into this town and out and do this, because otherwise, she said, there are going to be crowds of people around protesting my investigation. Isn't that amazing?
And it could get very emotional. You got to be careful.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. People often draw this conclusion that there is something dark and sinister about paranormal investigation. And that's one reason I wanted to delve into that tonight with the topic, the reality of black magic and necromancy. And actually, of course, paranormal investigation is simply about observing something you cannot understand and trying to figure it out. It's very simple. It doesn't mean that you're trying to trigger something that you shouldn't be tampering with. But on the other hand, when I first became involved in this field, I didn't know exactly what to think of magic. And it took me a while before I had enough experience to learn the truth about magic, and especially black magic. And so I guess a good place to start this conversation is by thinking about the human mind itself. Because, if I want to move my arm, all I have to do is think I want my arm to move, and voila, my arm moves. The very fact that I will this to happen and then it occurs shows you that there is some type of a physically manifesting energy that is produced by the human mind. It's that old mind-body dilemma, but the idea is that Newtonian physics says for every action there's an opposite but equal reaction, and you have to have something of physical stature, so to speak, to create a physical reaction. And so the mind has this physicality, and I believe that sometimes these thoughts can be condensed and fired off into the universe just like a bullet. And when that happens, well, there is some repercussion, and we don't understand precisely how that occurs, but I do know that when we started doing investigations around 20 years ago, little by little, I found that the activity was more prominent at places where magic had been practiced. For example, I went to a castle here in the mountains of western North Carolina. And in this castle, it is believed that there were a couple, a man and a woman, murdered and buried underneath the concrete floor. And I don't know that anybody's ever actually tried to crack this floor open and look to see if there are dead people down there. There might not be enough probable cause for something that extreme, but the rumor has always been that there are a couple of murder victims there.
Okay.
So we went there. My team and I did. And Brian Irish was with us at the time, the imaging expert I've mentioned so many times. And at this particular location, we were told that there was a woman who lived in the castle who was interested in the dark arts. And black magic is really kind of defined by either trying to produce a negative effect that harms someone or to access forbidden wisdom. And so this woman apparently was practicing some kind of necromancy, trying to bring up the spirits of these dead people. And we went right to that spot where this woman used to conduct her ceremonies. And we had all of our equipment set up, of course. At one point, the equipment went bonkers. And at the same time, Brian captured this incredible video that shows this bright spherical illumination. I know people talk about orbs and stuff a lot. This is different. You'll see what I mean. This bright emanation that appeared in this basement and swooped right up to the camera and then zoomed off into the darkness. And when you see something like this, it's so interesting because you can actually see the autofocus on the camera adjust to try to capture this thing. It was something that was, physically present in the room. And as usual, at coasttocoastam.com, there is a link to my site, joshuapwarren.com. And if you see this, it's one of the better pieces of footage of some type of a manifestation that might be a product of a magical ritual at this haunted place. And now there's no period after the P at joshuapwarren.com. And you know what? When it comes to magic, I feel obligated to also say this. A few weeks ago, I did one of these segments with you, George, and I talked about how to make a wand, a magic wand that would open the third eye. And I have gotten so many emails since then from people who want to know more about how to make that wand. I put some pictures of a wand up on that site so people will understand. I just used a chopstick, a wooden chopstick, with a piece of aluminum foil wrapped around it, and then a piece of cotton wrapped around that. But it just goes to show how much sort of enthusiasm there is for the idea of magic and so on. So after, going through these kinds of experiences, I became interested in trying to learn about how these magical rituals are done. And I met a man who is, a wizard, for a lack of a better term, who was very cavalier about the fact that he practiced black magic. He had no qualms about trying to hurt people. And, of course, karma is an issue. I believe that there's karma. I mean, for every action, there's an opposite but equal reaction, as I was sort of alluding to with Newton, and therefore you can't just project something bad out there and expect nothing bad to come back. But this guy became a friend of mine for a while, and he taught me how to do some of these magical rituals. And he would say, okay, let me prove to you what's going to happen. This guy's going to have a heart attack in 2 weeks. Oh. And I'd say, sure. 2 weeks later, guy had a heart attack. I actually observed it.
Was he willing that on the person, or he just knew this?
He was willing it. And he liked to use dolls, like voodoo-type dolls. And that can be very, very effective. In fact, I'm always a little frightened to even talk about this sort of thing when millions of people are listening, because it's not that difficult for a person with defined sort of condensed intent to get good results if you know how to properly use dolls and things like that. Well, I ended up having a falling out with this guy, which is not surprising because he maybe wasn't the nicest person, you can tell. And after we had this falling out, things started to crumble all around me in my life. It started with mechanical things, just cars breaking down, and then at the house, the well breaks down, and then, a fire almost starts because there's an electrical problem.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. And then it elevated to relationship problems. And then I started having, financial issues, and I never had enough. And it was just one thing after another, just this wave of bad luck. And it all culminated when something a very chilling thing happened to me. And I've probably mentioned this to you on the air before, but I'll go into a little more detail. On a Sunday afternoon, at sort of the climax of all of this bad stuff happening to me, I was napping on my bed. I lived in the time at a house that was kind of out in the country, napping, and my wife was lying there watching television next to me, and she had headphones on so that the audio would not disturb me. And I woke up at one point because I heard a strange little noise in the room. It sounded like plastic crinkling or something like that. And so I nudged her and asked her if she heard anything, and she said, no, of course not. So I rolled over and I went back to sleep. And as I was in that sort of half awake, half asleep state, the strangest thing happened. A voice, a very clear voice, said to me, there is a snake over there. And I opened my eyes, and there was a 6-foot black snake about 8 inches from my face slithering up into bed with me.
Yuck.
Now, people ask me about the scariest, ghost I've ever seen, and I don't know I've ever seen a ghost as frightening as this black snake slithering into bed to cuddle up with me that afternoon. I hit the ceiling, of course, and I'm sure there were plenty of words that came out of my mouth that would not be appropriate for this radio program. And then immediately this snake locked eyes with me, and I locked eyes with it, and we knew we were just going to be entangled in an epic battle. This was one angry snake. It was hissing. It was striking at me. And I don't have like some overwhelming fear of snakes, but you don't want to wake up to a scenario like this. I was pretty confused, and the snake kept trying to slither under furniture, and so I was, grabbing this snake by the tail and whipping it back out because I knew if it got into the furniture, it'd be much more complicated to deal with. Finally, I got a hold of this thing. And these black snakes, they're not poisonous, but they have these bacteria-ridden mouths, and if they bite you, you can get a terrible infection. And
sure.
Their fangs are sometimes so curved they can't even remove their heads from your arm after they bite you. So I took this thing outside with a machete, and I'm very sorry for snake lovers listening out there, but my only concern at that point in time was making sure this snake did not come back into my bed. So I chopped him up.
Oh,
and
Joshua.
I know. I was in a state of hysteria. I'm sure I have bad snake karma coming back from me from somewhere for this. But after I chopped this snake up, I came into my house, trembling with adrenaline. I had this musky stink on my hands from having handled this thing, and so I was walking to the other side of the house to wash my hands, and I heard my wife shriek. And she screamed, oh, my God, there's another one. And sure enough, here is a second snake that has appeared. Back to square one we go. Both these snakes, very aggressive. And that snake met the same fate as its partner. So at that point, now, mind you, I'd never had any issue with snakes coming into the house before like this. And that snake, if that snake, that first one, had come into the house from the same end as the second snake, then that snake had to slither all the way through my house, into my bedroom, past my wife, because she was sitting next to the door, around the bed, and right directly up to me. And I don't smell like a rat, so I'm not sure why that would happen. So at this point, I said, okay, this is ridiculous. I have had enough. And so I got serious, and I took a couple days learning about, protective rituals that you can do to shield yourself from all this negativity. And one other thing that I did was I actually took the head of one of those snakes and I put it in a jar, because the old-timers say if you put a snake head in a jar, it'll ward off other snakes. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you one thing. I've kept that snake head in that jar all these years wherever I've lived, and I've never seen another snake near my house.
It's
and
working for you.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It's working for you.
You know, apparently, and I don't necessarily have to understand how, but that's fine. In fact, if you want to see it, I know it's gruesome. Don't go there if you're a snake lover. I have a picture of this snake head in a jar on my website there, JoshuaPWarren.com. It's linked up to coastam.com, and you'll see what has maybe warded off these snakes. Now, I bring all this up because this might be an example of what we call the harbinger phenomenon.
And what is that?
When a person or an animal dies, within minutes there are flies on that body. And some of these flies come from 20, 30 miles away. And they come from a distance that is so great that we can't really scientifically explain how the fly knew that the dead body was there.
Yeah.
The particles of matter haven't had enough time to be dispersed by the wind to get that far, but the flies come from that far away. It's almost like there are some animals out there that are attracted directly to the energy of death. And this is something we can talk about more also with dogs and cats that are able to sense dying people. And if you know that there are animals out there that seem to have that connection with death energy, then it could be that when a negative energy field is condensed so strongly, so focused in one area around one person, there may be creatures out there that are attracted to that as well. And snakes have always been very mysterious and majestic creatures. The snake is one of the few creatures that, for example, in the Bible, represents the power of God and the devil.
Well, we know some animals, for example, some dogs can sense cancer victims.
Yeah, that's right. You know, the dogs and cats, they are able to somehow sense the fact that somebody might be either ill or dying. And if you consider that, we think of dogs and cats as, you know, friendly little cuddly pets. But the reality is they are predators. They have survived for millions of years by being able to track down weak things and kill them and eat them. And it therefore makes sense that dogs and cats have evolved a sense of impending death. And I do believe that when you have these stories about a nursing home where the friendly little kitty curls up next to the old lady who's about to die in 2 hours, it's because the cat is relying on that predatory sense and knows this death is about to occur.
Joshua, we're going to take phone calls with you when we come back. But let me ask you about curses. Can someone who is cursed fight it off, or how do they know they've been cursed?
It seems like that if there is a pattern, a synchronistic pattern, a chain of events in which one bad thing is happening after another, and you can directly connect this with an individual who has either gotten angry at you, and this is a person who holds a grudge, or somebody who just casts that evil eye at you, you know, that look. And, you know, if you start having that, you know, Curb Your Enthusiasm type of luck, and I use that as a reference to one of my favorite TV shows on HBO, if you start having that kind of luck where everything is going down the toilet and it's connected with a particular individual, the reality is there may be some type of a curse involved.
And it works. You can fight these off if you know what you're doing.
Well, yeah, you can, but you know, you also it's kind of difficult to advise people on how to do this because every situation is different, and a part of it is realizing that this is a battle that is taking place on a mental battleground. So, in other words, if this is being projected at you from a mind perspective, you have to fight it from a mind perspective.
We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about these stories of black magic and your phone calls with Joshua P. Warren's Paranormal Moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, Dolores Cannon joins us. She is, of course, a past life regressionist and hypnotherapist. She specializes in the recovery of lost knowledge, and we'll be talking with her about Nostradamus and life after death on our next Coast to Coast show. And welcome back. We've got Joshua Warren and your phone calls as well. What do you believe about karma, Joshua?
Well, I definitely think that regardless of one's spiritual beliefs, if we can so clearly demonstrate Newton's third law of motion, that for every action there is an opposite but equal reaction, that alone should show us that karma is absolutely real. Now, there are people out there who believe that, if you do something magical, whether it's good or bad, it comes back to you 7 times. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know where this extra energy would come from for this to be magnified 7-fold or 3-fold or however. It seems to me it's an equal exchange of energy. And even if you don't practice magic, this is also something that you should consider on a daily basis, just as you go through your life and how you behave and you conduct yourself toward others. But I will tell you something else that I didn't mention when I was telling you the story about the snake. This voice said to me, there is a snake over there. And that's what made me open my eyes and realize that this thing was slithering in bed with me. If this voice had not said this to me, then I shudder to think what would have happened next. And you know that after that experience, when I first told that story, I said to the person I was talking with that, well, my wife had said to me, there's a snake over there. And she said, no, I didn't. I said, huh? Because even though the voice didn't sound like her voice, I was half awake, half asleep, she was the only other person in the room. So I naturally assumed that she was the person who had told me that there was a snake there. And, of course, it doesn't make sense that she would have calmly said that, but, I wasn't thinking rationally at the moment. And so this makes me believe this is almost an angelic-type experience, that there is this realm in which we have assistance available, a little bit of help from time to time to make sure that we make the right decisions, that we keep that positive karma flowing, that we are protected. And whether I simply had a psychic ability that warned me of this snake being there, or whether there was actually some, invisible spectral being sitting there with a direct line to my ear, helping me once in a while, which, I kind of tend to believe that's likely. Either way, I was very happy to know that I do have some assistance, and I think if you try to be a good, positive person, that you'll find that there is a lot of help there for you.
Okay, let's go to the phones. First-time caller, Fort Pierce, Florida. Hey, Larry, go ahead.
Hey, George, can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, first-time caller. I've listened to you for years. And tonight I just have to ask Joshua, flies are something that drive me absolutely nuts. And when he mentioned that the flies come from like 30 miles away, how do you know that the flies are coming that far? And also, I had sailed across the Atlantic from Florida to the Mediterranean in a 33-foot boat, and I had killed every fly that was on this boat. And the next morning, and we're 1,600 miles offshore, I had more flies on the boat. Where'd they come from?
Well, Larry, that's a great question. I wrote a book, came out a few years ago, called Pet Ghosts, Animal Encounters from Beyond the Grave. And as a part of that book, I looked at the idea of what I call phantomals, which are animals or animal-like beings that have a paranormal sort of association. And, of course, I had to look at insects and even, believe it or not, microorganisms, dinosaurs, and even things that kind of blur the line, like Mothman, Bigfoot. And in doing so, I started looking at the Amityville horror story. And also I investigated a place in South Carolina, Lancaster, South Carolina, that had a fly infestation, and the flies would always appear around an area before something tragic would occur. And so I, at that time, looked into what makes flies special. And, of course, there are many, many reasons that flies are special. But at that time, I discovered that there were scientists who study flies, and I don't have all this resource information in front of me, though it is in the book. And what they would do is actually, set up a controlled experiment in which they would hatch a fly, and then they would track it. I think they would put a little daub of some radioactive material on it so that they could trace it. And then they would just actually monitor, these flies, and that's when they were able to determine that these flies could almost instantly seek out dead bodies that were miles and miles away, and they couldn't exactly explain how the flies would know that the body was there because, when something dies, it takes a while for the smell, the aroma to spread. So that is how the information, the data was gathered regarding that. But as far as on your boat, I can only imagine that there must have been some eggs somewhere that you didn't know about, and they hatched afterward.
Joshua, a couple of years ago when I had come back from Los Angeles to my place in St. Louis, I was cleaning and vacuuming. The house was empty for a couple months, and I noticed a slipper underneath one of my beds. And I'm going, now this is weird. My daughter has a key to the place, and my son has a key, and I'm going, there's a slipper here. And so I got down, and I couldn't reach it. It was under the bed. So I went and got a broomstick, and I put it under the bed, and I scraped it to me. It was a decomposed squirrel. It had been dead for at least a month. Maggots obviously had taken it. I opened up a room. It was loaded with flies. It was unbelievably gross. So I got rid of the squirrel, what was left of him. I had to call a company that sanded my wooden floor because he was like melted into the floor. And so I had to get him out of there and then got rid of the flies. And then I got rid of, I changed some of the carpeting in one of the other rooms and everything. It was gross. How they find this, I don't know. How did they get in the house?
The squirrel or the flies?
Well, the squirrel, I know, he snuck down the chimney and he opened up the flue. And that since has been bolted, and there's a catch on the top of the chimney now. That's not going to happen again. But how do these flies do this?
Well, I imagine that Santa is not the only one who comes down the chimney, and they probably found their way in the same way that squirrel did. And yet, there's no good reason to think that the smell of a tiny little squirrel under the bed actually emanated all through the house and up through the chimney into a position where maybe flies are going to pick it up coming from 30 miles away. And that's why I think it's important for us to realize that, I've kind of talked about this on the program before, but when we eat food, when we eat meat or plants, ultimately all we want is that energy. And we might be kind of primitive creatures in a way, that we have to eat other living things to survive. But it's possible that there is a level out there at which beings can just take energy directly. They absorb it almost through some type of electromagnetic osmosis. And this might be why that we do have these beings that sort of follow people around and suck their energy off. And therefore, there might also be a range of beings that are kind of in between. And we think of ourselves as humans as being so advanced and so civilized and so highly evolved because we're very egocentric. But the reality is the insects and the microorganisms, they control this world. I was recently at a museum, I guess it was the Field Museum there in Chicago, and in one section they had this area of, I guess they had stacked up some plates that represented a graph of how many mammals there are compared to how many amphibians and insects and so on. And the insect pile was probably, 10, 15 times the size of the mammal pile. And so some of these insects are highly evolved, and they might actually be more psychic than we could ever be. and very sensitive to the idea that they can find these energies and then use that to get the nourishment they need.
Back to the calls we go. Asheville, North Carolina. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, morning, George. Morning, Josh.
Hi.
Hey, happy birthday to you this Saturday. 25th is also my birthday.
No kidding. Well, thank you. That is very kind of you, Michael. And obviously good men are born on that day. So if all of our listeners just send me $1 for my birthday, I'll be a happy man.
I was wondering if you or the Lemur team have ever heard of that house about 3 miles outside of Burnsville in Yancey County. It sits on a knoll to the left as you go into Burnsville. And rumor has it, I was told this about 15 years ago, that the owner built the house on the knoll, and as they were excavating for the foundation of the house, they ran across some bones and some Indian artifacts. And the rumor has it that the owner, disregarded all that and built the house anyway, and they moved in, and within a month, the activity became so severe that they had to move out, and the house has been vacant ever since.
Well, I have heard rumors about this place. I have heard similar stories that, there is a house that is associated with some skeletal remains, and that there were workmen who fled because that when they were doing some restoration, they actually encountered some of these spirits. But
exactly.
But I've never talked to somebody who has been able to tell me exactly where it is so that I can sort of begin that process of getting access to it. Do you know exactly where it is, Michael?
I know exactly where it's at. I used to run a Coca-Cola route through there for Coca-Cola of Asheville, and what I can do, I'm going to be in Asheville to see my mom tomorrow and this weekend, and I'll go there and I'll ask the neighbors if you and the Lemur team can access it, and then I'll email you the directions.
Oh, that sounds perfect. That I would love to do that and bring the report right back here to Coast AM. And, of course, JoshuaPWarren.com has my email address, and just put Michael /Burnsville House in the subject line there, and we'll see if we can set something up then.
So this house that you're going to go to, you're going to go in disguise? You're going to do this?
Yeah, I actually have to. And, in fact, it's pretty silly that a guy like myself has to wear disguises once in a while. But I have dealt with a lot of very unusual people over the years. And the reason is I have always felt that, of course, in order to be a good paranormal investigator, you have to have good public relations, because I don't know what's happening unless someone tells me what's happening, and I can't get there to study it unless someone gives me the access and permission to do it. And so I've always been very available in the media. I've been on just about every TV-type program you can think of, and of course, with all the radio and the books and the website stuff, I mean, I'm very exposed. And I have had so many people appear on my doorstep that I now have, guard dogs and cameras and a lot of things to protect myself. And there have been some times when I have been out at events or investigations in which I've had to be very concerned about the folks who come up. Now, most of the time, it's a very positive thing. In fact, I have seen, George, that just in the past 15 or 20 years, the world has collectively opened its mind toward these things. I mean, you turn on the TV any night of the week, there's something paranormal on somewhere. And so I think that we are getting much, much better at accepting that this is a legitimate field of study. However, some people simply see the paranormal as a blank slate upon which they can project whatever twisted or dark ideas they may have. And so that is a concern. If you consider we are in the year 2009 here, and we're still essentially wrapped up in a religious war in this world, a war that starts with, my God is better than your God. That's pretty scary, and it shows you that however advanced we may feel we are, there is still a very large segment of the populace out there that is very much behind, and some of these people are frightening.
Absolutely. Long way to go there, too. Long Island, New York. Rich, it's up to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Joshua and George. How you doing tonight?
Good, Rich. Thank you.
I wanted to I really liked your story about the snakehead and also about the flies, but I want to tell you a couple of quick things. I used to live in the city for about 30 years, and I don't know if you ever lived in New York City, but when they rip up a building next to you, any mice that are in the area, they come right into your old brownstone, if you lived in an old brownstone like I did. And I'm in bed. I slept on the floor on a mattress, hippie style, back in the day. And I woke up one night around 4 o'clock in the morning. I heard this noise in the apartment, And I turned on a light real quick, and I was horrified to see I had one of these stacked stereo systems, with all the equipment and the wires in the back. I saw about 8 mice climbing all over the stereo thing, which gave me the creeps, freaked me right out. So I went out the next day, and I bought some traps. And I don't know why, but something told me when I caught a mouse, I caught it, and it was, it snapped its neck, and there was blood on the trap and everything. Instead of throwing it out like I'd normally do, because I knew there was a hole in the wall behind the stove. So what I did, the path where they had to gain entry to the thing, like a scarecrow, I hung the dead mouse upside down by the trap, just right there. So every mouse that came in the thing would see, hey, this guy is not to be messed around with, I never had another. I did it for a period of about a week, and then I took it down because it was stinking, But I never had another mouse for the entire 25 years I lived there in that apartment afterwards.
Incredible. That's weird.
The second thing is, I noticed I used to work up on 57th and 10th, and I used to walk to Columbus Circle to catch a train. And sometimes when I left work, I'd walk out, and there was this old lady who used to come out about 5 o'clock, and she had a bunch of seeds with her, a whole big bag of these, looks like bird seed, and she'd be scattering it on this vacant lot. And I'd see pigeons take off and come over and start eating the food. Well, the weird thing, I walked 3 blocks down and 2 blocks north. There'd be pigeons coming from everywhere. And one time I just looked back, they were all going to where that woman was. Now, it wasn't because of the tall buildings, it wasn't within their line of sight, the seed. But something told them the food was there. And so I think that just like with your snakeheads, I don't know that much that was a reptile and a fly, but I'm talking about mammals and birds. There's like an individual consciousness that you and I and George and every other, Homo sapien has, but there's also a universal consciousness, the same universal consciousness that woke you out of that sleep and said there's a snake in the room, the same universal consciousness that brings the flies from 30 miles away. The same universal consciousness that lets them know, hey, somebody's scattering seed 5 blocks over in 2 blocks.
Yeah, there is no question about that. Josh, we're out of time. I want to thank you again for another paranormal moment.
Hey, thank you, George. My pleasure, and looking forward to next week.
And, by the way, you ready for Halloween?
Oh, yeah. I've got some goodies planned for my next paranormal moment. It's going to be a memorable one.
Absolutely. For all of you who participated in tonight's program, thank you so much. Joshua P. Warren's weekly paranormal moment comes up in the 4th hour of the program, again, once a week. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Ross Mitchell, George Knapp, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM, I'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.